Hello, and welcome to my Fusion presentation, Lessons in Vibe Coding, Building Custom Widgets. My name is Caleb Viling, and I'm an Instructional Systems Support Specialist here at Northeast Iowa Community College. And in this video, we'll be going over how you can unlock the full customization potential of Brightspace's widget tool using artificial intelligence. So we'll start by going over the essentials you'll need to build custom widgets in Brightspace. Then we'll go over some helpful brainstorming techniques to refine your widget ideas. After that, we'll gain an understanding of what vibe coding is, and then we'll go over some best practices for vibe coding and prompt engineering. And finally, I'll give you some of my recommendations for development, deployment, and maintenance of your widgets. Also, stick around to the end of the video for access to these slides as well as other resources. So first, let's talk about the essentials you'll need to get started with building custom widgets in Brightspace. So I know this one is obvious, but you will need access to create custom widgets, and if you're not in that technical role, I still recommend you stick around, as you can probably ask your administrator for higher level access, or maybe you can just work with them to build some custom widget ideas out. Now, along with having access to create widgets, I highly recommend saving, pinning, bookmarking the D2L Developer Platform website. This website is extremely helpful. I use it all the time when I'm building custom widgets, and it just has everything that you possibly need, from the API calls to the information that's pulled. Extremely helpful. And then the next piece that I recommend having, because it is a core piece of this presentation, is having an AI tool. Now, this is totally up to you of which one you want to use. We are a Google school, so I use Google Gemini. However, you can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT, or any other platform that you're familiar with and comfortable with. So now that we have our essentials, let's move on to the brainstorming phase. So brainstorming your widget idea is a very important part of the prompt building process, as it gives you that foundation. And so with that, if you're anything like me, when you're presented with a blank canvas, your mind may go in 1,000 different directions at once, and you may struggle with coming up with that starting point. And so I've tried to help here, where I've included some of the guidelines that I follow to help build some of the widgets and tools that we use in our Brightspace instance. So to get started, when I look at a widget idea, I need to define these two things. So the first one is defining who the widget is for. And once I figure out my target audience, that actually really affects the rest of the process. And so, for example, if I try to build something for students, I need to make sure that the widget is easy to find, it is easy to use, and it doesn't have some complicated pieces to it because of their limited role permissions. Versus for admins, I can put the widget in a sandbox, or I can put it in a course page, something specific where they can easily find it that way, but I can make it do more things that they have access to, and I can make it a bit more robust. So that's just kind of that first piece that I think about. And then the second piece is defining how the widget is going to help. So in my mind, when I create that widget, I need to make sure that it makes a repetitive task or process more efficient, it addresses a frequently requested feature, or it solves a common issue. And if I can have my widget hit one or more of these, then I know it's going to be successful for my target audience. So just something to keep in mind when you're refining your widget idea, that you kind of want it to do these things, and so then that way it actually has value to that target audience. Now, I've also included some other items to consider, because these are things that we ran into during our building processes, and I think this is some helpful things to learn from. So the first thing is widget location. When you're planning on putting your widget out there for users to have access to it, if you put it like on your main homepage, you may need to think about where exactly it's going to be, how much space it's going to take up, is it going to push other widgets down, is it going to be hard for your users to find, things like that. Just because when you look at that from the student point of view, you don't really want to scroll too far. But if you're an admin, you could put it at the bottom of the page, because they're okay with just scrolling all the way down. So just something to think about when you're thinking about where you're going to put your widget. The next piece is role permissions. This really helps, because you define your target audience first, but you also have to think about what that means for the APIs you use, what that means for how the widget's going to function. So for example, if a student widget is available that's going to show them something for like content, things are going to be locked behind release conditions or accessibility dates for students. And so that could be something that affects your widget that you may not have anticipated. So just something to keep in mind is thinking about those role permissions that are available. And then the last piece that I have included is course design variation. So we have quality course design standards that our instructors need to follow, or should be following, but they're not always going to have the same exact grades. They're not going to have the same exact naming convention when it comes to modules. We run into certain things that just don't line up across all of our courses. And so that's just something to consider, is if you are building something out like a widget that's supposed to help students see what grades they have across the board, you may run into issues where sometimes it'll show a 0 for a course because the final calculated grade isn't released yet. Or maybe there's something there that's happening that, they're showing a low grade because everything else has zeros attached to it, right off the start. And so that's just something to keep in mind when you're building out that idea, is that some course design variations can really affect how that widget behaves. So now that we've gone over those guidelines, I do have a few widget examples that I'd like to share to help spark some ideas that you can use going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my tutorial sandbox here, which just has some of the various widgets that we've created over the years that we've put into different courses on our main homepage. So at the top here, we have our CBE widgets. These are for our competency-based education classes. And so if you were actually at the 2025 Fusion, we did show some of these off. But the first one here is our course progress tracker. We had an issue where students were completing work, but then the course had release conditions that they couldn't move on until the instructor gave them an 80%. And so the thing is that because they didn't have any other work to do, they would just stop because they didn't think they had anything else left with the course. They thought that was it. And so this progress tracker actually uses the gradebook to then determine where they're currently at in the course and how much the course is left. And it's just right on the homepage for them so they can see right away, oh, I still have to complete 3 more modules, so I'll come back when those are ready. And then the second piece here is this final module due date widget. It's very simple. It just pulls the final end date for the course, and then it takes back about a week. And it just helps students know that they need to complete everything by that date. Because it is a self-paced class, we want to make sure that they're just on top of that. And so with this one, it just takes that end date, takes a week off of it, and then there's a countdown to it, as well as a visual progress bar here that just kind of shows them that they're getting close to that end date. The next piece here is something that was super helpful and something that we push to every instructor now, is just this instructor profile widget. And what this does is it just takes the information from the user profile and displays it in the widget. So we look specifically at the instructor enrolled in the course, we take their user ID, and then we use that user ID to pull the information from that user ID's profile. So it'll pull their picture, their name, it'll pull any of the fields that they fill out, and if they don't fill out a field, then that just doesn't populate. Because again, we don't want to take up that space, and we don't want to make it, push other widgets further down. So we wanted to make sure that this was compact, but had the information. And this really helped because before we just had that information in content. And when you're doing your course copies and everything, it's hard to keep everything up to date. So this was just one way to have an area where they could update one location and then that information populates everywhere else. And then some of the last things I wanted to show here are just some of our widgets that we've created for our sub-admins and admins. So this one is actually an old widget that we don't use anymore, but it really kind of sparked off some of the bigger admin widgets that we've created because it kind of really opened our eyes to like what else we could do. So this course creation widget came about because every time we have a new faculty member onboarded, we had to create a sandbox for them. And then when they go through a faculty development course, then we had to create a faculty development sandbox for them. And it just became this tedious thing where we'd have to go into the creation tool, put in our specific naming scheme, all this stuff. So in order to help kind of take that piece out of there and kind of make things easier, we developed this where you put in the username of the person that you want to create the course for, you click get user data, it logs their user ID and their information, and then you can create a sandbox or the faculty 102 sandbox for them. And then, like it says here, it'll automatically put in content, it'll automatically enroll that person, and it will also put in a test student. And then there's just a simple log at the bottom that just kind of lets them know that it's done. So this was that initial piece that we started with. And we actually recently redid our organization of all of our classes. And so then that sparked the next idea, which was this course creation widget, which is the second iteration. And so this one, I wanted to make sure that we could do more, but also make it just as simple as before. So now what we can do is our admins or sub-admins can click on this little drop-down menu, and then they can choose one of the different options for courses to create. So for example, we can create a source course. And then from here, our admin or our sub-admin can come in and they can add an instructor. They can select the semester. They can enter the year. So I'll do winterim and I'll do 2026. And then as they fill out information here, so I'll say Math 120, then this information populates in the course name and the course code. So all they have to do is fill out the available fields, and then everything else will be available to them. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this add instructor, and I'm just going to leave it at Math 120. And I'll go in the template here and I'll say Math 120 for the template, and then you can select it, and that's all they have to do. They just put in the information that they need, and then because there are certain sections not available or not filled out, then you can't click the create course till that's done. So I'll just call this Math, and then we'll click create course, and I added this confirmation screen too. So then they would see what exactly was selected, the course information of the course that's going to be created, and then if they need to fix something, they can. If they want to create that course, they'll click create, and then a go to class button will be available here that'll take them directly over there. But this way you can enroll the instructor, you can create the class, and everything stays within our naming conventions for that specific piece, as well as it puts it in the correct semester. And you can select your template really easy. So just one thing that we created that has saved us a ton of time over the years. So I'll go ahead and clear that form here. The next one here is our digit. This is just kind of a clever play on our department name. But this one is just our time savers. So we just have a simple piece where we would copy in the same things every time to certain courses, like it's just a repetitive task. And so we created this widget so that we can just click on the thing that we want to copy in. And then you just click go, and then it'll automatically copy that in for you. So no more having to go to course admin, do the import, export, copy, all that stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. Now we just have this widget. So again, just a super helpful time saver. And then this last one is actually a more recent one that we've created. And this is the bulk archive courses tool that we created. So initially what we were doing is we were pulling courses that were 3 years old, and we were getting a list, putting it into Postman, running an API call. And it just took a lot of time every single semester to do that. And so instead, what I figured out that we could do is I just took that idea and turned it into a widget where you search. So I'll click search here, and then you can select based on the information you provide. So if I wanted 2024, I can look at all those semesters, whatever. So 2023, and I want to look at the summer because that's 3 semesters ago there, or 3 years ago there. And then I'll click retrieve courses. And then right now what it'll do is it'll retrieve all the courses within that summer semester. So it says there's 234, and out of that 234, 220 courses are active and 14 are inactive. And so then what we can do is we can just click this inactivate courses button, and it'll deactivate every single course that's seen. Now, something else that's nice about this is that if all the courses were active, you only get the deactivate button. And if all the courses are deactivated, then you only get the activate button. So something to keep in mind there is that we added some of these features to try to make things a little bit easier on us. But this ended up saving us so much time with this process. So these are just some of the ideas that we have implemented, and some things that I'm hoping can kind of spark some more ideas in you with building custom widgets in your environment. Along with that, we also have a student athlete widget that just displays the student, the sport that they're in and everything, and then that way our instructors know who their student athletes are. We also have one that downloads discussion topics. They just select the forum, the topic, and it displays everything for them in a nice, easy way to read. We also have a student information widget where they can find their org-defined ID and everything, but in a secure way. It's just at the bottom of the page. They have to be logged in with their information to see it. stuff like that. So things that you may be able to take away from this to kind of build some things in your environment. Now that we have our widget idea, let's talk about vibe coding. So vibe coding is when you use an AI tool to generate code using natural language prompts. Now I know AI can be a polarizing topic. However, it has been a game changer in building custom widgets, especially for schools that don't have a dedicated developer on hand. Now, personally, I'm not a developer, and while I do know how to read and write code, I just wasn't familiar with how to incorporate API calls to create widgets. And so that was until I got access to ChatGPT, and it really opened my eyes to the possibilities of what we could do with AI-assisted coding. And so now coding with AI is way more advanced than what it used to be, and it's in a more efficient state to where you need less information to actually create even better tools with an AI tool. And so this is where I think using vibe coding really opens up building custom widgets to just about anybody. So now that we have an understanding of vibe coding, we can start building our vibe coding prompt using prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is when you design, refine, and optimize your prompt to guide an AI tool to produce a more accurate or relevant output. Now I've provided a sample prompt here, and I've broken it down by highlighting the different sections based on the prompt essentials I have listed. Now if you follow a prompt engineering guide online, they will most likely have these 4 essentials. Context, which is what an AI needs to understand the task. Task, what you want the AI to do. Format, how you want things to look. And style, which is what the AI should use to build what you're looking for. I've also included 2 more essentials that I have found necessary when vibe coding widgets. The first is accessibility, which is ensuring the AI follows accessibility standards, as that's not always the first thing on its mind when it's building this out for you. And then also APIs, which is giving the AI reference to D2L API calls, either by providing these specific API calls, telling it to look at specific API calls to use, such as like I have here where it looks at the class list or course progress APIs, or just looking at the website to then produce APIs that may work best for you. And so when you combine all of these essentials, it really gives the AI tool almost everything it needs to generate the code you're looking for, reducing the need for more and more messages between you and your AI tool. So just having this code prompt can really help you develop your widget in a more efficient and faster way. So now that we have our code generated by the AI tool, based on the information that we just went over with vibe coding and prompt engineering, now we can move on to the development, deployment, and maintenance phases. So for development, I recommend testing your widget in either a widget sandbox or in like a test environment. That way, it's away from everybody, you have room to test it without it being in front of users that may get confused. And then while you're testing, you can come up with different refinements, maybe look at updates that maybe you didn't think about before, but while you're using it, it just kind of sparks in the moment. Just some things to think about. So just refine and update. And then once you think you have it in a good spot, then I recommend moving on to beta testing. I'm lucky enough where I have some coworkers who are instructional designers as well as instructors. And so I like to bounce ideas off of them. I like to have them test things out just to make sure things work for them, for their students. They can kind of give me that feedback. But you may also want to reach out to your target audience, see if you have some students or faculty members who'd be willing to jump into a sandbox to test things out and see how things work. And then you can use that to get some feedback and then look at refining and updating your widget some more. And so once you have your widget in a good place after beta testing, then we can now look at the deployment phase. So now that we're in the deployment phase, we can look at these 3 things. The first thing I recommend is building a widget log. This can just be a simple Excel sheet or a Google sheet, but just something that shows all of your widgets, just documenting all of them, putting a description, putting a location, putting when you plan on deploying them, as well as leaving some spaces for updates. This is just super helpful just to document in case you need to share it with another admin. If you just need to see where things are at, especially when you reassess your widgets, you just want to have something that you can go back to show where these are and how you're keeping up with them. The next piece is a communication plan. This totally depends on your audience. So for us, if I am going to deploy a widget for our faculty or our students or our staff members, I definitely make sure to create a communication plan where I send them information. I may create a video with instructions, and I just want them to know where that widget's going to be, how they can use it, and then I'll push it out on that deployment date. And so with like our admins and stuff, I can also be a little bit more relaxed where I just send them a quick video or instructions and they usually get it. So just something to keep in mind is that you may want to do a communication plan before you push the widget out. And then once you've created your log and after you've created your communication plan and you've sent everything out, then you can deploy your widget. And so after your widget's deployed, then we can look at the maintenance piece, which I just recommend these 3 things with that. So for maintenance, I just recommend reassessing on a regular basis. Depending on the widget, I reassess all of our widgets 1 to 3 times a year. Just kind of depends on the use case, the audience, everything. And during that time, I look at feedback. I look for any updates I can make. I'll also ensure that they're still meeting accessibility standards. And so I just want to make sure that I keep those in mind, I keep coming back to them, and they keep staying relevant with our audience. And along with that, any changes that I make, accessibility-wise or other, I make sure to log all those changes in my widget log, and I just keep that for myself for any documentation that I need. Like I said, especially if we have multiple admins or sub-admins, they can look and see what's been changed and what's been done. And so with that, that is my presentation. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more, feel free to scan this QR code to go to our NICC Fusion presentation website. This will take you directly to my presentations page so you can access the slides and more information about building custom widgets. You may also use that website to check out our 2025 presentations that we did. As well as there's links out to our NICC Brightspace Knowledge Base, our Quality Course Design website, and our Pixelated Pedagogy YouTube channel, where we talk about technology trends in higher education. And so I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great 2026 Fusion.